When did you first become aware that gender shapes people's experiences, and what moment stands out to you most?
I don't fully remember an exact time when I first realized that it shapes gender shapes an experience, but I a moment that does stick out to me is I used to have this friend and she was a twin. She had a twin brother. Um, they had younger siblings, and a lot of the time, it would be her having to take care of them, like, watch them or make dinner for them or clean up after them. And her brother never had to do these things. And I would ask her why that is and why she kind of goes along with it. And she said that's just how it was. And I think no, it's not necessarily the first time I realized, but that's like the big aha, like this is a a wide scale issue, you know.
Yeah.
um so my first question for you is, what stereotypes about gender do you think are the most common, and why do they persist?
Honestly, one of the biggest stereotypes that comes to mind is how women and men are kind of put into these like binary roles.
Mm-hmm.
Like women are automatically assumed to be like emotional or delicate, and it's like men are supposed to be like the leader figures that are strong and they do the physical work.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's little comments that people say like man up or you throw like a girl that people
Yeah.
just constantly throw around in society. And it's become so casual that I feel like we've internalized it as like, oh, this is normal, this is the standard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like these ideas stick around because we grow up with them at such a young age. Like it's how our family dynamics are set up. It's what we see on TV, and it becomes like we treat it like a fact instead of like an old habit that's
Yeah.
outdated. Oh yeah,
I I completely agree.
hopefully I answered that
Yeah,
all the way.
you did.
Okay, hold on. I forgot I was supposed to ask a question.
It's okay.
Growing up, what was one gender rule you didn't question at the time but now see differently?
So growing up, my mom primarily took on like most of the like childcare like roles, whether that was feeding us, making sure were dressed or bathed, to even just daycare or school and stuff. He almost had no hand in it whatsoever, even when it came to like extracurricular activities like sports and stuff. He barely interacted with it. And growing up, it just seemed normal because it was what I had always known. But you know as I got older, that's not something that I think should be a thing, because it is such a thing in men to have children and then basically disappear from their lives, even if they are still there physically. So I
Yeah,
think.
I honestly relate to that a lot
Mm-hmm.
because I grew up with like an estranged father figure,
Mm-hmm.
and he was only supporting us kids like by paying child support. So it was only financial and it wasn't emotional,
Mm-hmm.
nothing like that. So
Yeah.
I relate to that a lot.
And my next question would be, what gender norms did you learn growing up, and where do you think they came from?
Okay, so I grew up in a Muslim household, so we followed the Islamic faith, and a lot of people don't know that because I kind of like had to redirect my
Mm-hmm.
whole journey on my own. So I definitely learned gender norms like early on, and they were clear, especially for women. It was about being modest or being put together, being careful with how we acted in public because everything was about being, I guess, acceptable to the male gaze.
Mm-hmm.
And boys just didn't have it with like they didn't have it the same like with monitoring. Like my brothers, they barely had any of the chores to do. It fell all on the girls and the pressure all on the girls. So I feel like a lot of it comes from like a mix of religion and culture and just like kind of observing how adults like talk to children
Hmm.
and like specifically how they talk to daughters and sons like very differently. But I feel like it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's just like the way that it was always done. And so, like I said earlier, it becomes like the standard almost
Yeah.
because it's just been perpetuated. Um, my third question for you is what helped you first realize that gender identity and expression can appear differently for various people?
Honestly, a lot of it I learned on my own as I like got older because I never really fit into the norm of what it means to be a man, I guess, in terms of society or even just a boy. I like when it comes to like physical stuff. I hated having my hair short and not having any say over getting like how long it was. Um so I knew I was different and stuff and it at first I was not fully aware, but eventually like I saw like in myself that gender doesn't have to be so strict of a category to be in. You can look a certain way and still be a man.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. And honestly, I think that's why I was using the wrong pronouns for you by accident this entire time.
That's completely okay.
Yeah.
I've experienced that a lot, and I do understand it is partly because of the way I present myself, so that's why I don't get mad. And usually people are very understanding about it. So, or at least they have been as I've gotten older. Of course, I feel like uh, we like sorry, growing up we perpetuate a lot of the stuff we hear, so it was harder growing up than it is now. I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, my next question is how do you think language influences the way people understand gender beyond two categories?
I honestly think language makes a really significant difference. When the only options that we grow up with are he or she, and from the moment we're born, it's like you're labeled.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it seem like these are the only like possible options. And so I think that's why we get so caught up in the binary aspect of life. But once people start using words like non binary or gender fluid,
Mm-hmm.
or even just introducing themselves with like pronouns, it can open up space for more than just two categories and like they can expand upon the binary that has kind of restricted them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that small language changes can make people feel either excluded or included really fast. And I personally see this in the classroom or like in my workplace because people try to create a space for everyone. And it kind of just starts with the words that we use and how we
Mm-hmm.
speak to each
I agree. I think the way we speak to each other matters a lot, and we should always try and lead with kindness whenever we can.
other. Yeah. For my fourth question, I have how have different parts of your identity, such as class, religion, sexuality, etc., shaped how you see yourself?
Um, I used to in the past a lot of the time feel shame or sadness when I thought about my identity because I didn't fit into what society told me was normal. So for a long time I couldn't fully accept myself and it was hard to love myself. Um, but as I got older, it became easier because I I guess became more aware of how different we can view gender and whatnot. So
Yeah, I love
sorry.
that answer.
Thank
No, that's
you.
a great answer.
My next question would be what does it mean to recognize that gender inequality doesn't look the same for everyone?
To me, this means that acknowledging and noticing that everyone's experiences with gender are layered
Mm-hmm.
and like a lot goes into it for someone. Like the challenges I face as a woman might look totally different from another woman who's Latina or from a different religion. I think these experiences stack on each other, and you can see it in wage gaps or beauty standards, safety issues, all of
Mm-hmm.
it. So when we talk about women's issues, it's never like a one size fits all. It's honestly very unique and individual to each woman and
Mm-hmm.
person. Um, can you tell me about a time you felt pressure to present yourself a certain way because of gender expectations? What was that experience like for you?
So, one of the first times I sort of like felt the pressure to present myself in a certain way was when this was at a time when I was more masculine presenting. I didn't have long hair or anything. I did very much just look like a boy, and I wanted to wear nail polish to work. I did work in a restaurant, but I worked in front of house, so wasn't handling any of the food. So I thought it would be okay because they had started allowing other people to wear nail polish, and then when I went into work and had it on, within like 15 minutes of being there, the manager came up to me and told me that it was not okay and I had to take it off. And it was because of like for the food safety. But I had other coworkers who were directly handling the food with like long fake nails, and that was
Mm.
okay.
Yeah, it
But
seems like you're just trying to cover it up.
mm-hmm. So I think that was the first time I felt pressure to like stay in my gender, sort of.
Oh.
So
Well, did you leave that job? Because I hope you did.
I did eventually leave that job, but she got fired first. So,
Oh, period.
my next question is, what parts of your appearance have you felt most aware of because of gender norms?
Ooh. Honestly, this is a really good question, and it's one where I feel like it kind of hits really deep
Mm-hmm.
because, like, my whole life, especially with like the religion that I grew up with, and kind of just like the gender that I was socialized into, I feel like it's my whole appearance.
Mm-hmm.
Being a woman, I feel like we're constantly being watched or judged in some way, shape, or form. And I have like this constant awareness of how I look, especially like in public spaces. And it's not just because I'm self-conscious or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I read this poem by John Berger, and he says the line, "Men look at women, women watch themselves being looked at." And this line stood out to me when I first read that poem because it's exactly what it feels like to me. It becomes almost second nature for me to think like, do I look okay? Is this too much or is
Mm-hmm.
it not enough? And it just kind of creates like perception anxiety.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's always like a camera on you or like you are constantly having to abide by the rules of like other people's gaze. So I feel like a lot of my awareness comes from feeling like appearance is part of what society like expects of women like me,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I understand what or I, because I can't fully understand because I haven't had that same experience, but it does sound like it would be very like anxiety inducing,
Yeah,
stressful, just all of it. So I
yeah.
can understand where you're coming from.
When I first got my job at Walmart
Mm.
with like customer service, I hated that I was being perceived by other people, especially men, because I've had some really weird interactions. So
Yeah.
this question really reminded me of that. Um,
I'm sorry.
what's one comment you remember receiving about how you were supposed to act because of your gender?
So it wasn't necessarily a comment, it was more of like an interaction. I had this friend, He he had went through a lot of stuff in his life. He had lost his mom very early on, and you know, I was never someone who never tried to get to know people. Like I always would ask questions, and maybe sometimes I would overstep and whatnot.
Yeah.
But one day I asked him like how he felt because uh, that's a hard thing to have to go through, and I had another friend who was experiencing something similar, so I wanted to like get their opinion on it, um, so I could better know how to help that friend. And
Yeah.
he told me, uh, that's not something we talk about. Like, just play the game,
Oh,
because he didn't want to talk about something like deep and emotional, and perhaps it was just because it was something so personal to him. But I part of me felt like it was because we were both men talking to each other. So
yeah. That makes sense.
my next question would be, how did you first learn what behaviors were considered appropriate for your gender?
Honestly, I learned it just by kind of observing how adults reacted to certain things, like different activities that children were partake in and stuff like that. Like if a girl spoke up in class, she would be called bossy, but like
Mm-hmm.
if a little boy did it, it was like, oh, he's, doing what he needs to, like a
Yeah.
leadership role. I feel like girls were encouraged to be helpful and calm, and boys were allowed to be loud and pushy, and it wasn't really something that people would kind of pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it wasn't ever explained. It was just like something that we observed through reactions and I guess dynamics that we grew up with.
Yeah.
And even now, I see it in the workplace where my coworkers that are women are expected to be the peacekeepers or the organized ones, and men are the complete opposite, and it's okay. So it's wild to me how much of what we learn without anyone even saying it directly. It's not like said out loud, you just know it.
Yeah. Children are very perceptive. They pick up on a lot of things.
Where have you noticed gender influencing who gets taken seriously or who gets assigned specific tasks?
So I think just like back to my family again, even though like my dad was so absent in my life for the most part, he always had final say over everything. Like no matter what. Our family was struggling financially and we had to file for bankruptcy. I think I was like 12 or something, and we were fortunate enough to be able to go somewhere that would have been honestly better for us, but because it wasn't where he wanted to live, he said no. So we passed up on that, and eventually we had to move into somewhere that was actually worse for us in the long
Oh,
run, just because it was somewhere he wanted to live. So that was really hard to like see because it almost, I think it sort of broke our family a little bit. So yeah,
I'm so sorry.
that's okay.
I'm glad you're in a better
Mm,
situation now.
thank you. Um, my next question is, what role does religion play in defining or limiting gender roles within a community?
I feel like religion definitely plays a big role, especially because I grew up with one of the two biggest religions in the world, Islam.
Mm,
So, growing up Muslim, I feel like I saw how religious teachings shape what was expected of girls and boys. For girls, it was like things like modesty, responsibility, or even how we conducted ourselves, especially around men,
mm,
was all important. Some of these teachings gave structure to my family and like the Muslim community that I was a part of at one point. But other times it felt like really limiting, especially for women. And I just didn't appreciate the fact that it was, I guess, perpetuating the idea that women have to be subservient to men.
yeah.
And I just saw it as really strict. But in some families, religion becomes like the main guide for gender
Mm-hmm.
roles. In others, I feel like it mixes with culture until you can't really tell which is which.
Yeah.
My final question for you is how do you think gender influences whose voices get heard in conversations about big issues like gun violence or reproductive rights?
I mean, when it comes to like reproductive rights in themselves, it is a fully woman-led experience, and most of the time it is men who have say over what is happening to women and their bodies. Something I'm sorry, but they cannot experience it and it
Yeah,
is not hurting them at all. So for them to just, fully get to be like, you know what, yeah, you're not going to do that anymore. That just never sat right with me. Even before Roe v. Wade was overturned and everything, the
yes.
I always thought the same. I was like, why do men care so much about an issue that doesn't necessarily involve them? And I understand the argument for, they helped make the child, okay, but it's not their life at stake,
No,
you know?
literally.
So,
Yeah, we're gonna get along just fine.
and I think my last question for you is how do you see ideas about gender evolving in the future as society continues to grow and change?
I feel like gender and the ideas surrounding like the binary standard that we've kind of grown away from, we're becoming like more flexible and open to diverse experiences, which
Mm-hmm.
is nice to see. I've seen younger generations, they don't seem as scared to question things or express themselves in like a unique or different light, which is
Mm-hmm.
really refreshing. And I think social media is a really big part of this because it pushes conversations like TikTok platforms and stuff like that. Because people feel like they can share their experiences instantly and like comfortably from the comfort of their own home.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the future is moving toward a let people be themselves kind of mindset. Instead of focusing on like everyone either has to be this or this. And this ties back to everything we talked about like language, stereotypes,
Mm-hmm.
religion, social expectations. I feel like they all shift when society starts listening to people instead of trying to kind of restrict them into these narrow little boxes because it just doesn't work for everybody.
I completely agree.
Okay, I
And
that's all my
yeah,
questions.
well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.